Bernie Sanders, bring me a dream. Make it the strongest that I've ever seen. The middle class will stop bending over, and that's when all their lonesome nights are over. Sanders, I'm so alone, don't have a country to call my own. Please turn on your magic beam. Bernie Sanders, bring me a dream. Bernie Sanders, bring me a dream. Make it the strongest that I've ever seen. Give it the word that I'm not a rover, and tell it that its lonesome nights are over. Sanders, I'm so alone, don't have a country to call my own. Please turn on your magic beam. Wah, Bernie Sanders, bring me a dream. Bang, 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 bang. Bernie Sanders, yes, bring us a dream. Give it an education with the come hither gleam. Give it a boost for lots of clean energy, please, and lots of wavy hair like you, dear Bernie. Bernie Sanders, a country to hold, country to hold. Would be so peachy before we're too old. So please turn on your magic beam. Bernie Sanders, bring us, please, please, please. Bernie Sanders, bring us a dream.
Hi everyone, welcome to We the People on Bernie 2016 TV. I'm Aniko Nolan, your host for tonight, and that little number was Bernie Sanders, Bring Us a Dream by Babylon 5. Very cute. And I'm here in Phoenix, where a lot of things have happened this week, with the voter suppression hearing taking place on Monday, and anti-immigration bills and dark money bills going through our legislature. Multiple protests happening this week. So it's appropriate that our guest this week is somebody who has been in the thick of it, and it's obvious to see who's fighting with the people and who's fighting with their donors. And this week we have District 24 State Representative Ken Clark. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for coming. It's an honor to have you. We also have John Spalding on comment moderation, and Bad Wolf Time Lady on also comment moderating, copying and pasting the comments. So thank you guys for being here. Appreciate all of you.
Good to be here.
I wanted to go over a couple of things before we start as far as Ken's background. You're a real estate agent. Tell us how you got into politics and how you started serving our state.
Oh, it's a long story about the politics thing. I was raised as an Air Force brat. We stationed a bunch of different places. Most importantly to me was Western Germany at the height of near the end of the Cold War, so in the 1980s. So we saw all kinds of things going on that just gave me the level of interest that propelled me to get involved with politics. My first campaign was in 1992. A woman named Karen English, who won a congressional seat that year from Flagstaff, Arizona. So more or less a bunch of other things I've done over the years. I was first elected to the state legislature in 2002. I just served one term and then chose not to run again for a second term, and toddled off and did a bunch of other things for a while. Became a realtor in 2008 because that was a good time to become a realtor, I suppose. So. But it actually gave me the flexibility to come back, and I came back in 2014, and I plan to stay here for as long as I can hang out and do good.
Awesome. And you've got some other side projects going too that you host on a monthly basis. Get Your Phoenix. What's that all
Yeah,
about?
it's called Get Your Fix, and what we do is we highlight a new locally owned business or something cool that's happening in Central Phoenix. It started in early 2009 as a way to encourage people to come out and stay involved in their neighborhood, support these businesses that are downtown at a time when lots of folks were talking about, they were hiding because the economy was failing. So all these locally owned businesses, we like to give them a boost that helps them out. So, and it supports my real estate, but it's never meant to be like this, one of those networking events where you just pass out business cards and then forget who you talk to. So it was always about supporting Phoenix. And then we spun off a Christmas market we call the Festivus Market, and it has everything from the Seinfeld jokes, feats of strength, the airing of grievances, Festivus poll, and we actually got a beer that one of the local producers named after us called Festivus Ale. So really, my life is complete at this point because I have a beer named after me. And then, we still had 130 vendors, I think, last year, and 14 food trucks, all locally owned. It's just a way to support local.
Very cool. Love it. And I put a couple of pictures of the districts. Can you tell us about the districts that you serve? I know it's Central Phoenix and then a little bit of Tempe, right?
No, actually, it doesn't go to Tempe, but it goes into South Scottsdale.
Oh, South
So
Scottsdale.
that district is it spans a lot of different income levels, a lot of different stories there. You've got all 35 historic neighborhoods. So these are older houses people have renovated, but you also have everything from, wealthy private Catholic schools all the way to, 90% free and reduced lunch schools that have a lot of challenges. And these are working class folks. We also have all of the downtown arts districts in that area. In my district, a lot of activity downtown, a lot of growth over the last 15 years in Phoenix, and a lot of. I could go on about that, but I know that's not what we're here to talk about.
Very cool. I actually live in the Fairview district by the Encanto Park and the fairgrounds.
Yeah.
So
Love
I'm around
Fairview.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Awesome. Well, let's jump into the first subject that I wanted to talk about, which is what is happening here with the Arizona voter fraud and the hearing that took place on Monday. I understand that a lot of people were waiting to speak, and some got to, but some didn't. And I know you were on the panel there asking questions.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of things that I was curious about that I want to ask you about that you can elaborate on. I know that polling places were decreased and that there was something called a pre-clearance that was not done. Can you elaborate on what that is?
Sure. Since the civil rights era, basically, there were a number of states that required what's called pre-clearance every time they make a change to anything, basically anything to do with elections. Okay, so if you change redistricting, if you change the number of polling places, you had to go to Department of Justice and seek pre-clearance for the decisions you are making. So in the state of Arizona, everything from legislature on down to Water District Board, I believe, had to seek pre-clearance from Department of Justice. Now, there was a court case back in 2013 that eliminated pre-clearance for a whole host of states. The Supreme Court believed it wasn't necessary, or they believed that if you were going to do it for these states, you had to do it for all states. And Congress wasn't willing to require pre-clearance for all states, so now it's gone. So what happened is Helen Purcell, the county elections director, reduced the number of polling places from around 200 is what it should have been, or more, down to 60. And since she was not required to pre-clear that with the Department of Justice, she just did it. And I asked her in the committee if she thought that this pre-clearance that this would have passed pre-clearance, her decision to go to 60, and she said, no, I just didn't even think of that. And that's the point of pre-clearance. Whether you say that her decision is malicious or it's just thick-headed, there's a reason we have pre-clearance, and that is to check things like this. So it should say something that almost immediately, just a few years after that decision to eliminate pre-clearance, we had a problem. People weren't able to get to the polls, regardless of party, regardless of ethnic background. They couldn't get to the polls. It remains to be seen whether there was one ethnic group or that was damaged over the others. I think people are kind of still crunching the numbers and figuring that out. But as a general rule, she absolutely undermined that election.
Well, a lot of people were calling for her resignation and had some strong words for her, and she kind of sat stoically through it and said, yeah, I made a giant mistake, but really, I mean, in my view, the option is either deliberate negligence or incompetence. So those are two bad options. So
Right.
yeah, it didn't turn out very well. But apparently she's not going to resign, and the members of the committee now decided that they're going to hold up the vote, right?
They're going to hold up which vote?
They're not going to re-vote.
Oh, I
in other
see.
words.
No, and here's the problem with a revote, and I know a lot of folks would like to do that. In order for there to be a revote, there has to be a lawsuit. The court has to choose, they have to find that there's sufficient evidence to show that the campaign, or I'm sorry, the election would have turned out differently. So let's just say that, I don't know what the results are, I didn't see them, but let's just say that the results were, Hillary Clinton beat Bernie Sanders by 10 points. You would look at the number of people who turned out and say, is it reasonable to believe that had even 100% of those people gone for Bernie, that it would have gone for Hillary? And probably not. And so it was a very high bar to seek a revote. I think the reality is, in this situation, we wanted to make sure the people who had their registrations goofed up by the Department of Motor Vehicles, that their votes will be counted. And if there is a lawsuit to require a revote, we're just going to have to watch that. It's kind of out of our hands from the state legislative standpoint, and we'll have to see what the lawyers do. The other problem with a revote is that if we get it to happen, would it be in July, or would it be, how soon would it be? And by that time, the decision might be made as to who our candidate's going to be. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't try for that, but I just want everyone to understand what a high bar it is to make that happen.
Sure. There is a petition with like 90,000 votes on it. If you reach 100, it's to revote, basically a petition to revote. So I don't know if that's even worthwhile at this point, but I understand Bernie Sanders had a lawyer, his campaign had a lawyer speaking here yesterday, and they were thinking about putting a lawsuit against Arizona.
Yeah, I'd love to speak with his lawyer and see what's on his mind and how he would go about doing it.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Another thing that I wanted to mention was the $1.25 that they get reimbursed for independents who can't vote, as well as the fact that a lobbyist tried to speak for Helen Purcell when she was supposed to give the presentation, and the audience was not having it.
Right, and that, I guess I am less concerned about a lobbyist speaking for Helen Purcell, because they're technically called legislative liaisons, but if they're not hired by an outside firm, if they're representing government entities. But that aside, that didn't bother me as much as the bigger picture, which is the Secretary of State saw the 2016 budget, which the legislature passed in March of 2015. She knew that there was less money available for elections, she knew coming into her job that there was great confusion among independents about whether they're allowed to vote in a presidential preference primary versus a regular primary. She had a public statement with Helen Purcell the day before the election congratulating Purcell on how she was running it, including the 60 polling places. The election centers or polling centers, they gave them a different name. But all of these things laid out, and rather than focusing on the fact that Purcell used someone to speak for her at that meeting, we should be focusing on the many, many decisions that led up to this that are the faults of Michelle Reagan, Helen Purcell, the Republican legislature.
Mm-hmm. And what happens now going forward if we don't get a revote, it just stands and Bernie loses the state and nobody really gets punished for this happening?
Unfortunately, I think that's probably correct in the short term. I will tell you, I'm a Bernie supporter, and I'm not convinced that Bernie would have won the state anyway. And that's, again, not to say that it's okay, because it's not. Mm-hmm. What we need to do as activists and concerned citizens is we need to organize to make sure we have different leaders in office and that we can change the laws so that this does not happen again. Because look, let me go back to pre-clearance. Just because Department of Justice is not there to pre-clear anymore, to look over the shoulder of someone like Helen Purcell, doesn't mean that we couldn't have a body of retired judges to do something like that. There's certainly sufficient evidence to suggest that we should. Even before this event, there was sufficient evidence to suggest that. Now, even more so.
I see. Well, thank you very much. Let me go ahead to John Spalding and see what the chat is up to, see what kind of comments and questions we have.
Great. Thanks, Nico. The chat's lively, and so Pat Weldon hopes that Arizona has more protests. ROFL Ryan says, I'm loving this. Ryan Cox, District 26. So thank you for joining us. Let's take a question, Ken. It is from Heisenbernie. What's your position on private prisons?
Oh, I think they're a ridiculous waste of money.
That's good. All right. What is, not that's good as far as our answer, but that was nice and short and sweet. What's your position on climate change?
It's very simple. Climate change is real. I believe that over the years, coal industry, petroleum industry, along with folks at Fox News and all this whatever information or entities that they've put forward have done their best to confuse the public about the reality of climate change. After I was in the legislature the last time, I was the Energy Office Director for the state of Arizona. And I know the issue as well as anybody, and I know that if we are going to survive and flourish into the future as a country and as humans, we need to address this.
Thank you very much. Anything else, John?
Thank you. But yeah, let's do one more. That last one was from Nikola Tesla, so is this one. Is Arizona becoming more progressive as a state?
That's a great question. Demographically, yes. And I believe that we're in this kind of flux period where the demographics are changing and voters are changing their expectations of what their representation should be. But the Republican governor, the Secretary of State, and many legislatures over the years have put in place elements to hold on to power, I would suggest, for longer than what would normally happen if we had a free flow of candidates and campaigns. So to put that another way, they have been able to gerrymander districts to stay in power. They've been able to change elections law, change campaign finance law, and so that they can maintain a lock on power that I think is outsized and disproportionate to the number of people who actually support them. They like to grumble about this last redistricting effort that I was involved in, saying that the Democrats took control of the process and got more of what they wanted, but that's just empirically untrue because we ended up with even fewer competitive districts than we had the last time we did this process.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
And
thanks,
anything
Ken.
else, John?
No, not right now.
Okay.
But any reactions? Go ahead,
Do
sorry.
you want to read a few reactions?
No, I was going to say any reactions that you guys have from that round, go ahead and update them in the chat.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we jump into the next subject, I really wanted to just address what happened in the gallery after the hearing. As you know, a protester was taken out and arrested. What is your interpretation of that, and what happened there? Do you think that was an abuse of power, or what happened?
Well, I've seen in previous instances where the leadership of the legislature, the Republican leadership, treats different crowds differently. Years ago, I saw the gallery filled with conservative advocates of one nature or another, I can't remember what, and the leadership in the House really didn't say anything. But I remember even a day later, there were, I think, LGBT advocates filling up the gallery, and they had the police all over the place. That was years ago. So even in this case, you saw their fear manifest in the number of police that they had on the scene. So what was unfortunate, now I believe in the decorum that is necessary for the legislature to do its business. I did not agree with people screaming from the gallery. I don't think it helped anybody. Having said that, the gentleman who froze in place and did what most nonviolent protesters do, which is hold on to something, let them move you out, that was not a threat to the chamber. And certainly not the way that these guys represented it to be. And the idea that he's being brought up on charges of assaulting an officer is absolutely absurd. He had a safety pin in his pocket or on his body somehow, and to be able to say that he assaulted an officer, it just blew my mind when I heard it. It's not like he rammed the pin in the officer or did anything. His hands were busy holding him down. I mean, I watched the video. Mm-hmm. So the officers did what they're trained to do with nonviolent protesters. You confine them, you keep people away from them, you get their hands away from what they're holding, and then you lift them away. I didn't see the officers doing anything that was out of the ordinary from that standpoint. But when they later came along and said that he tried to assault them, I just can't believe any judge is going to uphold that. Mm-hmm. But I want to say something else. After I went upstairs and said whatever I could to discourage people from yelling more and encourage them to sit and listen to the process, I went back downstairs, and the majority whip, Representative Livingston, came up to me and he said, "Well, are we safe?" To which I said, "Yes, they're nonviolent protesters. What do you think they're going to do?" But this is the mentality that you see down there. These folks are very afraid of, I don't know what they're afraid of, frankly. And in the days following that event, 2 Republican members have insisted on wearing their guns on the Capitol floor. And I find that offensive. Many of us do. And just a really bad idea. But it demonstrates the level of paranoia that they have about people who are trying to redress their government.
Mm-hmm. Right, and they should, because people are going to react to injustice, so they're not just going to sit by and be taken advantage of like that for on a continuous basis. And this big injustice with the voter fraud just happened, so it's not surprising that people are responding in this way. And as far as the cops, it's a hard balance to strike, like you said, between safety and letting people have their freedom of speech. And yeah, the safety pin thing was very far-fetched. But this is a really good segue into the next section that I wanted to bring up, which was the dark money, which is why the session, the hearing ended, because you guys had to go to session to decide 1516, which is the dark money bill, right?
Right.
So
Right.
how did that debate go? Because at that point I left. After that happened, I left, so I don't know what happened with the debate. I know that the conclusion was that it passed, and it's on Doug Ducey's desk to sign, which he likely will. But how did you guys get to that? And I know the vote was close.
Actually, we just got word about half an hour ago that he did sign it.
Oh, great.
And frankly, I'm surprised that he waited until Thursday, because when we went into office on Monday morning, I fully suspected that he would sign it that evening or the next day. I mean, this has been a priority for him. He really wants this, and it will coalesce power for him. So what happened is they postponed the debate on 1516 on Monday, presumably because they were afraid of the people in the gallery. So we did the discussion the next day, the debate. So first we debated it. Let me back up and say the bill started in the Senate. It was approved by the Senate with last-minute strike-everything amendment that at least our Democratic caucus was not allowed to see. Then it came over to the House. A couple weeks ago, I kept them for 2.5 hours in Elections Committee while I went page by page over that bill and asked the guy who wrote the bill, the Secretary of State's one of his elections attorneys, one of her elections attorneys. I asked him questions for 2.5 hours, and we took public testimony. Of course, it passed out of that committee, and it went now. This was 2 days ago on Tuesday. We kept it for another 3 hours on the floor. My plan, the best I could hope for, was to go over that bill in great detail in the hopes that some of the Republicans who had told me that they were concerned about the bill would find the courage necessary to vote against the bill. I was told by a number of Republicans, certainly enough to defeat the bill, that they did not like the bill. But many of these folks also told me that they were under great pressure to vote for the bill. This should tell you exactly why the increase of dark money in our lawmaking process should be fought tooth and nail, and that is, it's not just about what some dark money group spends in a campaign or in TV ads or on a mail piece. It's about the power they hold over people in the decision-making process.
Mm-hmm.
It's that. Now, let me tell you a story. I remember during last year's budget hearing, contentious budget, a lot of cuts, and we were told that the Republican holdout votes on that budget were approached by Governor's Chief of Staff Kirk Adams or this other guy, Sean Noble, who's known all over the country for his use of dark money. They were approached by these guys and said, and they were told, if you don't vote in favor of this budget, we're going to spend $200,000 against you in your next race.
Wow.
So in that instance, who's making the decision here? Is it somebody who's elected by the people, or is it somebody who's got money? Well, we know the answer to that question. Mm-hmm. This bill, in many ways, will do even more of that, even more acutely than we are seeing now. And it will make it even more difficult for people to get control of their elected government again.
That's terrible. I mean, this bill is like, it gives double the amount of money that they're allowed to give, right? It increases the amount of money that they're allowed to spend.
Well, there are a lot of things this thing does. Right now, an individual's allowed to give a candidate basically $5,000, which is 10 times as much as it was just 3 years ago, by the way. So they've been working toward this for a while. But one of three key provisions is what I call the Kingmaker provision, and it allows one candidate to give money to another candidate, or such as, say, one politician give money to another politician. And we call it the Kingmaker provision because that means that if let's say you're the majority leader of the House and you're collecting a ton of money from contributors, wealthy folks, people in your district, you can now spread that love around and get in return favors. Now, how is it you're allowed to get favors? Isn't that illegal? Well, yes, and technically it's illegal under this bill, but they have weakened the provisions that describe whether there's a quid pro quo. So now you have to show that there was an intent to get someone to take a certain behavior in return for money. That, to me, is one of the scariest parts about this bill. Another scary provision is that it abdicates our responsibility to disclose dark money that is spent in our state. So let me just dig down on that a little bit. Dark money means some 501c3 organization, some what they call a social welfare organization, right, spends money on behalf of a candidate. They can't give it directly to the candidate, but they spend it on behalf of the candidate. So instead of finding a way to require disclosure in Arizona, as even Justice Scalia suggested we should do, they abdicate our responsibility by saying, well, as long as you're registered 501c3, as long as you're registered with the federal IRS and you do your reports to them, we don't need to regulate you. Okay? This does two things. This allows them to spend more money without reporting against candidates individually. And if they're a 501c4 organization, actually even a 501c3, I think they can spend even more money for or against ballot initiatives, which the law considers lobbying. The old law considered that lobbying too, and so does the Supreme Court. But it allows them to go out and almost unlimited in the way they can spend for and against candidates and for and against ballot initiatives. We're not going to know where the money came from, where it was funneled, how many organizations it went through to get there, what do they actually represent. And the bill also weakens the disclosure requirements on campaign literature and on TV ads. So more and more ways to hide things. And I could go on for another 2 hours, but I won't.
Wow, that is ridiculous. And of course, this is why everything is happening right now, is all these protests and people complaining about it because they're realizing that this is happening. And with the Bernie Sanders campaign, they're getting more involved and understanding what's going on and that things are rigged in this way that you just explained. And I also wanted to say you are a Bernie-crat, so that's why we have you on this show and why we appreciate you so much, is because that's Bernie's vision, is to try to get this corruption and dark money and unlimited spending of unknown sources on candidates out of our government. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And I do want to mention, you know, while I strongly support Bernie, there are Hillary supporters, there are Republicans who hate this bill. For instance, our state treasurer, Jeff DeWitt, who supports Trump, God knows why, but he does, he doesn't like the bill, and he understands the Kingmaker provision problems of the bill. So as we move forward, I'm going to work with anybody that it takes to get this thing overturned if we can, and we're in a unique position in Arizona to be able to do that.
Well, hopefully you can accomplish that. Let me go to John Spalding and see if we can get some questions and comments before we go into our next subject, which will be the immigration. John?
Cool, thanks, Aniko. So I had a follow-up to one of your discussion points. So, hypothetically speaking, if a politician was feeling pressured to vote a certain way, what would be an example of what type of pressure that would be for an individual?
Well, I gave you the example of a budget vote.
Mm-hmm.
So the governor who has a specific budget plan would go to that politician, or it doesn't necessarily need to be the governor, but they would go to that politician and say, I want you to do this or that. A great example from our own history in Arizona is that of the majority leader of the Senate or the House controlling his or her members with the power of the campaign contributions. So it used to be, back before 1986, that the majority leader and the minority leader would go out and raise all the money, and they would give it to their members if the members were doing what they wanted to do.
Gotcha. Any other ones?
Other examples? Well, they could be outside groups as well. You know, I love the folks who are supporters of this bill like to say that, well, this can happen now with political action committees. Well, no, it can't, because political action committees are independent expenditures. But the degree to which it could happen now, it shouldn't, because we should have provisions in law that put a firewall up between the candidate and independent expenditure committees of any kind. Now, I think we've got good examples here in Arizona. Our Secretary of State, Michelle Reagan, when she was in her primary election running for that position in 2014, spoke out against dark money. Then, dark money forces helped her win her primary election against another Republican, and in the general, she suddenly decided that there was no way to report dark money, so you might as well give it up. And now she's run this bill, which basically gives free rein to dark money.
Gotcha. I liked what you had to say, and thanks for those examples. I think it helps in terms of just kind of talking about what's really going on out there. I liked that you did talk about that you were going to be working across the aisle. Oh, I lost it. And so there was a lot of comments in there saying that we need to spread some Bernie love into the red places. JMar 505 said that we all need to move into those red places and have conversations and talk with people about these issues. And I think that's cool of how you said that you were going to be doing that with folks. Keeping on a different topic from what we do in the questions, they just kind of come in and we ask them. Pat Renfro wants to know, and this is for the TPP, what is your stance on the TPP?
Oh, I was not in favor of it.
Okay. Let's see. This is a bit off topic. Will you work towards increasing solar energy projects and other clean energy?
Will I work toward them? It cut out there.
Yeah, will you work towards increasing solar energy projects and other clean energy? Or maybe just give some examples of some of those issues that or.
Sure. Not only will I work toward them, but I have. In between the time that I was a legislator previously and when I became a realtor, I did a little bit of lobbying at our state capitol on behalf of renewable energy interests. But in addition to that, when I was in the legislature last time, I ran bills to encourage greater solar installation on the many flat rooftops that we have all over Arizona. Big warehouses, shopping centers that had acres and acres, millions of acres of feet all over the state where we could have installed solar. You can guess that those bills did not pass.
Yeah, right.
Which is really sad because, I mean, it's always sunny here. And there's so many parking garages. I mean, if we filled all our parking garages with solar panels, I mean, we could power the whole state.
Well, true. We would still have to have some spinning reserve power, but we could do pretty well.
Yeah, yeah, and if there was more of a national focus and every state strategy was accepted, enacted, I mean, it wouldn't even be an issue. So it's a little bit ridiculous. ROFL. So this is back to the dark money and the Senate bill that you guys have. What do you suggest that citizens do to get involved and help the fight against bills like that?
I'm really glad that you asked that, and because I've wanted to talk about that. First, I think we need to understand that this bill is a template. If you live in any other state, this template is going to come your way if they are successful in keeping it in law here in Arizona, and maybe even if not, because we know that they share these bills all over the country. So we have to beat this here if we want to keep it from moving to where you are, wherever you are in the country right now. To me, this is an existential crisis for anybody who wants to support free and open and transparent elections. So what we need to do, let me explain that in Arizona, we are allowed to force a referendum on any law that we don't like. We have to get a certain number of signatures no more than 90 days after the end of our legislative session and after, of course, the governor has just signed it. Now, it was a sad thing that we had such a low turnout in 2014, but one benefit of that is the number of signatures that are required for us to get this on the ballot is much reduced, because the number of signatures is based on how many people came out to vote in the last election. So we need 75,000 signatures, and if you put a cushion, a couple 10,000 over that. One of the challenges we're going to have here is that we have what's called strict compliance in Arizona, meaning if there's one mistake on that petition of 15 names, the whole thing will be thrown out. That's one of the things that the Republicans put in place to make it harder for citizens to take something to the ballot. So it's also important to note that we did this already in 2013 when the Republicans put a law, HB 2305. They passed a law. A lot of terrible regressive campaign and elections issues. We successfully got enough signatures to put that on the ballot. There were many more signatures required then, and we did it anyway with people power. So I know we can do this if we choose to. Now, it just turned out that the legislature on that one met in early 2014, and they rescinded the law that they put in place, which we then started to take to the ballot, so we never ended up voting on it, if that makes any sense. So what we're up against is that it typically costs a lot of money to get something on the ballot. It could be $300,000 or $400,000. What we need here in Arizona is we need volunteers, we need contributions. I would love to have Bernie direct some of his attention here to us once we get started, because I believe that the whole country will see how important it is that we beat this here in Arizona. But even so, by comparison to other campaigns, we really can do this with people power. And so here's the other thing you have to keep in mind. And I'm going to take my glasses off because I can see my reflection in everything I'm doing. It's important to keep in mind that if we get this on the ballot, we then have to defeat it. So let me explain that. What you're doing by putting a law, a referendum from a law that was passed by the legislature, is you're effectively asking the voters of Arizona, how would you vote on this law? As if you're sitting in the legislature, right? So we will have to get the signatures, get it on the ballot, and then defeat it. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So and that's very doable. Um, and I think that the public understands what's going on. I don't think the race is that expensive once you get it on the ballot. The dark money people will spend a lot of money to try and convince people that they should vote in favor of 2015-16. But I have a specific experience with this that I think is useful here. Back in 2008, I helped run the campaign that kicked payday lenders out of Arizona. And it was a very similar experience. The pro-payday loan people, who, by the way, are very close with the dark money folks that I mentioned before, those people put an initiative on the ballot to convince people that payday loans are a good thing and they should stick around Arizona forever. What we did was we defeated that by 60%. They spent $12 million trying to convince people that payday loans are okay. We spent $180,000 and we beat the pants off of them. So I have complete faith in the people of Arizona to get this done. What we don't have yet, because it's only been a couple days since it got out of the House, we don't have the organization set up yet. What we need everyone to do is stay tuned on my Twitter page, on my Facebook page, hashtag SB1516, and at some point here in the near future, we're going to give more instructions about what needs to be done.
Mhm. Awesome. Thank you
Cool.
very much.
Thanks, Ken.
And thank you, John. I appreciate the questions. And that's actually a really good segue into the next section, which is I'm going to kind of run over quickly the set of bills, a bunch of bad anti-immigration bills that actually one of the greatest examples of what you guys are just talking about, this peaceful civil disobedience, is what these women did at the Capitol protesting HB 2451, which is a bill that, quote, would repeal a statute that allows eligible prisoners with an order of deportation to be released to U.S. Immigration and Custom Enforcement. And I'll let you elaborate on that, but I just wanted to mention there's several other bills. And if, John, you want to run through those slides, 4 through 14, while Ken is talking about it, it will show 4 young ladies chaining themselves in front of the Capitol protesting this bill. And Ken, if you want to elaborate on what that bill is and what it would do, and your assessment of what happened at the Capitol as far as this protest.
Well, let's start with the protest. I didn't know about it until we were on the floor voting, so I couldn't get over there. You know, peaceful protest is important. I did hear from a reporter who said something very interesting to me. He said, "It's great that they did that, but I wish they would have given us an hour notice because they didn't get as much press as they could have gotten." But you know, I don't want to criticize them. I think it was important that what they did, and it was peaceful. I know that the Republicans who like to carry their sidearms on the floor of the House would like to think that they're under siege, but these are peaceful protesters. So the one bill you're talking about would require somebody who's an illegal immigrant who is in jail to fulfill a sentence rather than being sent over to ICE. And their belief of the Republicans is if you that if you give these folks over to ICE, they're just going to send them out of the country, and therefore they don't fulfill their entire sentence, and they don't think that's fair. Well, it's not 100% certain that ICE is going to send them out of the country. ICE does have its own detention centers, and people end up staying there for quite a long time. But it's also a great cost to the state to have people sitting in prison who, frankly, we could be doing something else with. But it's a funny thing, what these legislators are happy to spend money on, and what they're not willing to spend money on.
I have a couple of other ones, if you wouldn't mind talking about. I'm just going to read through these, John, and then Kenneth, you can just elaborate on the rest of these a little bit. Senate Bill 1377 would stiffen the sentences for immigrants in the country illegally. HB 2223 would punish the so-called sanctuary cities. 2370 would prohibit Arizona from using financial and human resource to enforce actions by the federal government to relocate refugees and unaccompanied non-citizen children in the state. And lastly, 2024 would remove a provision allowing court costs and allowing fees to be awarded in immigration enforcement proceedings, and that's from the AZ Central article.
Okay, so you've gone through a bunch of them, so I might ask you to repeat them for me in a second. Okay. So the first one we just touched on. The second one about sanctuary cities is the same as a whole host of bills that the Republicans have been passing, because they believe that the cities are, getting out ahead of them in some ways. Either the cities are requiring people to not give out plastic bags when they sell you groceries, or that they are requiring minimum wage standards that are higher than the state, or that they're allowing sanctuary to illegal immigrants. This is a general philosophy that the state legislature has. They just don't want these cities doing these things. And I happen to believe that for the most part, we need to respect local control when it comes to cities and towns. And they're obviously, for ideological reasons, they don't like that. They're happy to talk about local control when it has to do with the federal government, but when you pass it on down the chain to the cities and towns, they don't like local control so much.
Mm-hmm. And let's see, the one that would prohibit the financial and human resources to enforce actions by the federal government to relocate refugees.
Oh yeah, there's also this crazy attempt to, I guess, exempt ourselves from federal law. We see that a lot, and this is another one of those. We did a proposition that won on the ballot, Prop 122, I think, last year, or 2014. Same kind of thing. They're also trying to decide which federal laws regarding our our federal lands or environmental protection. So they're just picking and choosing which laws they don't want to have to do. And obviously, immigration is something that they can rally up the base with, that they believe that they need to deal with in some other way than the federal government. So they're talking about that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. John, do you have any questions or comments from the chat regarding these things? Immigration in general?
I was looking to see as they were coming in. I was what would, well, this is close. This isn't close regarding immigration, but Sekmara would like to know what do you do to help the Native Americans of Arizona, or what would you do to help them in Arizona and other states?
Sure. This issue, it's a broad question, so let's talk about education, because somewhere about 80-some% of Native Americans are not reading at proficiency by the 4th grade. We also know that there is significant need for infrastructure in native lands. Yet at the same time, the way our tax structure works, I've come to learn from my Native American colleagues in the legislature, is that taxes are sometimes collected on reservations that goes to the state, just like any other taxes go from the state, sales taxes, but they are not redistributed in an adequate way back to the reservations. So as a result, the reservations don't have the funding they need for the infrastructure. Same with schools, electricity, water. So the state, they don't treat Native American populations fairly.
Mhm. That's exactly right. And actually, I've been involved with activism at Oak Flat, which is the piece of land the Apache, San Carlos Apache holds sacred, that was put into the rider that is now being given to Resolution Copper to mine. But the Obama administration had made it into a historic site, so there's environmental impact reviews that have to be done and all this stuff. I'm wearing my Oak Flat shirt. Jane Sanders was just here visiting Oak Flat, and actually that's a really good way to kind of segue towards the end of the show here. We're going to kind of give closing thoughts, and then I actually have a really cool video that I got of a hoop dancer when Jane was visiting here. They did a really cool presentation for her, so we're going to end with that. But Ken, if you have any closing thoughts that you'd want to tell our audience, and how did you feel about the show today? You said it gave you inspiration before.
Yes, it did. And Nico, I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity. I've been on countless radio shows over the years because that's part of what I did overseas. But and I love doing that, and I love going on TV. But this is such an amazing interactive experience, and what an incredible organizing tool. I didn't even know this was a thing. So it's inspiring to me to see that. And specific to Senate Bill 1516, I find it inspiring because we need to organize, and not just in Arizona. Let me back up and say all of the questions that your very astute viewers brought in come down to our electoral system. We can't have good policy regarding immigration, Native American populations, clean energy, unless we have an electoral system that is responsive and transparent and fair. And we can't have that if Senate Bill 1516 passes and then is replicated in other parts of the country. The unfortunate problem for me is that I'm just an elections nerd, and I really find this stuff interesting. The average person, their eyes are going to glaze over when we start talking about elections, and that's understandable. But what we really need in Arizona is we need people to latch onto this issue and help us defeat this law, or put in place another ballot initiative that will allow for clean elections and transparency. Everything flows from a good electoral system. We must have everybody fully engaged on this, and I hope that we can have the strength of the Sanders Nation involved to help us defeat this. I have a lot of hope for Senator Sanders and the way this election is going and everything he's done, but I hope we can get a little bit of everyone's time helping us here in Arizona.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and thank you for everything that you do here in Arizona. We appreciate you very much. Thank you, John Spalding, for being our comment mod, and thank you for relaying everything to us. John, any last thoughts?
Yeah, a couple last thoughts, and these are just for mine and just from what I've heard out there. So people were very receptive to your message. Keep us informed on when you get the structure set up for the dark money piece, and we will have another episode, do a follow-up, and talk about your organization and get people going in that with you. I really liked how you talk about how there are templates, like these laws and these things that get passed by Congress and by legislators. They're really templates, and if they pass, then other states can use them. And so the key to organizing at our level is that we need to think just like that and know that we can match that with the people that are on our side. And so all these things that we're talking about, we have to have the organization, the structure, and the willingness to put template laws out there and get them on the ballot and get them passed, or at least get them out there so that we are connecting people. So thank you for talking about that, and I know that resonated with other people. So thanks, Ken.
Thank you. We will. We'll never have as much money as they do, but we will have the people.
For sure. and that's the most important thing, because that's what they don't have. So yeah, we're going to do it. And John, I just wanted to mention, since we're doing this place a vote thing, if you want to tell real quick, Ken, about that, because I think he would be a perfect tech savvy state person to maybe take it to the state. Don't you think, John?
To me? Yeah, you talking to me? Okay, yeah, sure. Give me 1 second here.
Or sorry, I should have said John E. But yeah,
right.
since you've been talking to these guys.
I wouldn't be able to do it justice.
Well, hi, Ken. So I'll just explain this real quick. Place a Vote is a platform for a modern democracy, and we've had conversations with the team. They've been working on this for several years. They're ready to go live with a sitting rep. We don't know who that sitting rep is, but you would be sitting rep number 2 unless you're already working with Place a Vote. And what it is a bank secure. It's secured by blockchain. The guys that wrote this are bank level security coders. They're brilliant. It ties my voter information to the voter database. If I were a constituent in your district, you would then receive a notification saying a new constituent has logged in. All right. You get to look at the fact that I'm there. I can mark my choices anonymous or viewable to the public, and basically I get to look at all of the bills and things that you are going to be voting on, and I can tell you how I'd like you to vote, and I can give you a comment. Right? You get all of this data aggregated. You can literally go, once you're connected with the system, you could go to your peers and say, this is how the constituents in my district would like us to vote on these things. Want to talk about it? And show it on your app. It's 100% secure. Would you be willing to at least talk to the Place a Vote team about the aspects?
Oh, absolutely. Sounds fascinating.
Wonderful. We will get you connected with Job and Luke. That'll be fantastic, and hopefully we'll work that out to have 2 sitting reps turn on Place a Vote very soon.
Very cool. Now, I know they said that they were right now only at the federal level and that they were going to get to the state level.
Yes.
So maybe Ken will be in the future, but
yes.
But it's a good introduction.
Thank you. Yes, and Nico, I forgot about that. Absolutely. But yeah, maybe this will force them to work code faster. So that was it. Thank you.
Yeah, but it is a fascinating thing too. When I heard of it, I was like, wow, that's awesome. So, but anyway, thank you very much, you guys. It was a great show, very informative. I'm going to watch it back and learn even more from this. And also, I want to go out with this awesome song from Oak Flat, Protect Oak Flat. And thank you very much, Ken, for being on the show.
Thank you.
Ken, is there any last words you'd like to say, Ken, to everybody about Arizona?
Stay tuned. There'll be more. We're getting ready to go.
And where can they send you? Where can they send you money?
We haven't set up for that yet, so please watch me on Twitter at Ken Clark FORAZ, or you can follow me on Facebook, which is Ken Clark FORAZ, or you can use the handle or the hash Senate Bill 1516.
Cool.
There you go.
And his website is kenclark4az.org. Also, I just wanted to mention we have a couple of events coming up that Bernie is going to be speaking at. One of them is the Harlem Women's Roundtable. Rosario Dawson, I think, is going to be a part of that. That's tomorrow. And then we also have the Town Hall in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and the Green Bay Rally. So those are all coming up tomorrow. So.
Oh, and to clarify, sorry to interrupt, to clarify, we have not set up a contribution page for the initiative, the referendum yet, but I can take contributions for my campaign. I always forget about that part. That's kind of important, right?
Yeah, you got to raise money for yourself too, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, everybody donate to Ken, and thank you very much. Have a good night.
Coach Magistrate is Oliver Team Maricopa, and she's also Coach Magistrate is Oliver Team Maricopa, and she's also representing the Duncan family too. Thank you.
Hey, Ken, we can actually talk in here.
Because he had to jump through a lot of hoops to get touched. Yes. He might be a good hoop dancer by about this time.
But anyway, this is my grandson. When my father used to drive us through here on the way to Phoenix, he would point in this direction and say, I heard some people camping over here, saw some mountain spirits last weekend. And he would always say every now and then that some of the older people, when they were camping here getting acorn, they would see a gun somewhere in these trees. And so those are the things that are very special to me because of my father sharing those stories with me. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and introduce RJ. He, a couple of months ago, he was featured on the cover of Scholastic News, the little elementary school newspaper that's published nationwide, as a native hoop dancer, and he was also picked as one of the 8 coolest kids in the United States. So please welcome RJ. He was a world champion youth hoop dancer 2 years ago. So RJ, hoop dancing.
huge